Donald Trump has yet to be inaugurated, and yet I'm already looking at predictions way too early to look at the year 2028. Now, I don't know what the outcome of the Trump presidency is, and I'm not ready to predict that. However, I think that one thing that the Republicans do correctly get every time without fail, no matter what, is obviously, not everybody in the Republican Party, not everyone who labels themselves conservative agrees on everything. There's been a lot of never Trumpers, there's been a lot of only Trumpers and no other Republicans. There's been a lot of, we want, pro life, no exceptions, whereas Trump said, you know what, we want three exceptions, assault of the mother, life of the mother, and incest, and all those types of things. So you've had a bunch of divisions within the Republican Party, but what's different from the Republican Party versus the Democrats is at the end of the day, when it comes election time, when November hits the calendar, you see very miraculously that the pundits, the politicians, the factions, they all group together and put their support. I'm talking Nikki Haley, I'm talking, you know, every Republican, even people like Mitch McConnell, who have criticized Trump more than a lot of other Republicans, they all come together and they put their support behind Trump or whoever is Republican that's running. At least this is the current Republican Party. Now, on the flip side of things, Democrats also vary on a lot of issues. You have, the Bernie Sanderses of the world, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Kamala Harrises, local Democrat politicians. What happened was miraculously, they were staying behind Biden, but when the election season was fully fledged, they divided even more. You had the pro-Palestinian front, you had, um, people who, like, when I worked for my congressman, who is a Democrat, we had constituents, people of the Democratic Party, calling in every single, hour or so, like, hey, I want Biden to stay, I want Kamala to go, or I want Kamala to, fill in for Biden, I want Biden to stay. It was damn near a 50-50, believe it or not. So I think, you know, a big thing that people are not understanding is the division within the party, especially come election time, does not help whatsoever. It makes you look like a hodgepodge. It makes you look like a mess. And now, on top of that, I was going to say, okay, you know what? Trump won this and that. We can talk about his appointments. But when I look at the Democratic Party and when I look at, the wings, the liberal pundits of the world, you don't see any unity. In fact, you see even more separation. And there was a very good clip from Piers Morgan, who I have mixed feelings about, but he had Alan Littman, Cenk, the guy who is the founder of the Young Turks, which is a progressive news platform, and then he had NYU student, commentator, influencer, kid, Harry Sisson. Now, these three gentlemen were all, they're all supporters of Kamala Harris, and they're all voters of Democrats usually. They're all progressives. And yet I'm watching these clips and they're fighting with each other because, and I happen to agree with a lot of the things that Cenk was having to say because Alan Littman, for those of you who don't know, is a professor at American U for, according to him, over 50 years, and he's published many books. He's developed these 13 keys to the White House, where he is very accurately able to predict every presidency since, I don't know, I think 1984, I think is the first election. So he's able to correctly predict every election, and he doesn't look at polls, he just looks at keys. 13 keys that he's developed. If they're true or false, that's going to decide if the incumbent party stays or, the challenging party wins. And this election, he very confidently said Kamala Harris was going to win. I was a stickler. I said Trump was going to win just based on my thoughts. And he was wrong. He admitted he was wrong. I knew it. I didn't, obviously, I'm going to put some hindsight bias, but I felt that his keys were flawed. I felt that he didn't truly predict every single president. For a while, he said he could only claim to predict the popular vote when he backtracked in 2016. There's good evidence for that. He would disagree with you if you made that point, but all those sort of things happen. And, he very confidently said that Kamala Harris was going to win. But surprise, surprise, she didn't. And I watched his post election live stream, and the only thing he had to say was, there's so much misinformation and disinformation, misinformation, misinformation. I'm sorry, but maybe I'm naive and I don't understand politics. That is a very possibility. But I don't believe that every single American who voted for Trump, and the majority of them who cite the economy as the number one reason as to why they vote for Trump, I don't think that they were all misinformed per se. You can't deny someone, you know, when they're feeling economically crap and when they're feeling economically good. People understand their bank accounts, they know they live their lives day to day, and to sit here and say, like, from the academia standpoint, a lot of students um, in my university, it's what we call armchair activism, right? You don't know what it's like to go from day to day, maybe being a laborer in Pennsylvania or Michigan, a steel worker, or this and that. I think they understand their bank accounts. And now to say that, oh, people with a college degree are more likely to vote Democrat, that means something smarter people vote Democrat. I think that's a bunch of baloney. Um, I think that just has to do with the fact that people with college degrees go to white collar jobs, and if you are a white collar worker, you think differently about the economy than you are a blue collar worker. That is not to say you are smarter or dumber than blue collar workers, and it just frustrates me because these blue collar workers are the people that decide elections, and to say that, oh, they don't have a college degree, they're stupid, they don't know a thing, the economy is doing great, they're just misinformed. Well, I agree. Yes, there is misinformation. But what I think personally is that these economic indicators we rely on, GDP growth, job growth, all these sort of things, they're faulty. They're just faulty. And you cannot blame, over 50% of the electorate for saying that, oh, they're all misinformed. That's too much of a stretch in my book. Yes, there is misinformation, but the economy is still not at where people want it to be. It's plain and simple. I think, with the idea of deficit spending, you can take this all the way back to Nixon taking us off the gold standard, the idea of introducing bonds, printing money at, whatever rate the Fed wants to do. You're creating this illusion that, the US dollar has some backing, when in reality it doesn't, because we've been showing that when in doubt, just print money and borrow on yourself. And we're just always going to raise the debt ceiling. We're never going to default. Like, how can you default? How can the U.S. government default on its own debt if we borrow from ourselves, if we're loaning out money to ourselves, and all these sort of things? This is a quasi, fantasy oriented economy that we're in right now. We're deficit spending out the wazoo, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and this is some scary stuff we're doing. And now it's gone to the point where GDP growth, real GDP growth, GDP per capita, these are no longer sound economic indicators. And I think instead of blaming the people, you ought to blame the government, because the government is for the people, it's by the people, and it's of the people. I, you know, a lot of people say, you know what? Oh, people are not as educated, they're not as civically engaged, they don't vote as much. In my opinion, it's almost as the same rhetoric. If you force everybody to donate, is that a donation? If you force everyone to vote, is that a conscious thing? Is that a civically engaged society? I disagree. I know donations and voting are not the exact same thing, and you could draw some discrepancies in that comparison, but what I am saying is, you know blaming the people is never the answer. And I've heard some people say, you know what, we're not as the Democrat Party is too leftist, it's too radical, it's too progressive. I disagree. I honestly think that if you want to fight the Trump era populism, you need to fight fire with fire. But here you have these pundits who don't know what they're doing, in my opinion. Obviously, they're far more educated than me. But from my experience, working for my congressman, talking to voters, understanding, veterans and people who live off Social Security and those types of things. That's where I was able to pick up my general vibe and the sense of where this country is at and make my prediction that say, hey, I think Donald Trump will win. And these people are going to keep combating themselves, are going to divide themselves up, and the possibility of the Democrat Party winning again in 2028, in my opinion, is not getting any higher. And with that being said, thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your day.